Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. I want to welcome the new subscribers to this channel, and I want to thank you all for subscribing. And I hope you've been enjoying the editorials on technology and other related issues to Africa that I've just introduced to this channel. Now, today we want to take a look at a video, a review on a video and an editorial on it that is titled Innovating Africa Documentary The Rise of Tech in Nigeria. So as usual, let's just sit back. Remember to be subscribed to this channel, turn on the bell notification, leave your like and your relevant comment, and let's dive into this video and see what we can learn for life and not for school.
Origin. Origin.
Seem to believe that the tech ecosystem have really started the startups that we see today, right?
It feels like a lot of people have just shown up and have completely forgotten how to sort of pay homage to the bedrock.
In the 90s, Nigeria was heavy on software. I think those type of stories haven't been told enough.
The storytelling's been critical.
People need to understand what's going on. People need to be excited. People need to be angry. But I think this is a story that needs to be told, because without them, there's no fintech industry. None. Zero. Nothing at all.
Like, there's so many folks that, bled, sweated, cried to put all this stuff together.
But I think they don't get enough credit for some of the things they've done. Everybody wants to talk about the sexy stuff and the shiny app.
Unless something changes by 2025, 2026, we'll essentially really be back where we were in 2010 when we started, right? Right now what we have is inconsistency, and I definitely feel that we need to address that core issue, otherwise nothing really matters.
Because these things need to be put down for posterity.
Hi there, my name is Itimi. I'm the host of Founders Connect, a show on YouTube that spotlights founders and operators in Africa, their life stories, their lessons, their challenges, and the journey that's brought them to the products that they're currently building. I started Founders Connect because I realized that there are lots of stories about the products that we're building, the accelerators that we're joining, and the money that we're raising, but not a lot and hardly in depth about the founders themselves. So why did I decide to do this documentary? Like many others, tech has changed my life. Specifically, tech in Nigeria changed my life. From learning digital marketing, to training thousands of Nigerians on digital skills, to leading growth for early stage businesses, and then even investing in astounding businesses. And now, telling the story of inspiring founders via my YouTube channel. In so many ways, I have been impacted by the never-ending tech innovation and how it has all come together to build a thriving ecosystem. Secondly, after doing over 50 interviews, I realized that the stories of founders are single stories, yet in every interview, I am reminded that everything in this ecosystem is connected. Every time I interview a founder, I'm inspired by their grit, their resilience, and of course their innovation. Even more, I discovered bits and pieces of how everything influences one another. And so I thought to myself, why not tell this bigger story? The story of the ecosystem that has changed my life. This story explores how it all started, what tech in Nigeria was many years ago, some of the most pivotal moments in our history, the policies and key players that has made a big difference, and shows the investments that have contributed to how we do. It also paints a picture of how far we have come and highlights what we are most proud of as a people. More importantly, it shows that we're just getting started, that there's absolutely no limit to what could be achieved in the coming years, and there's definitely so much more to come.
I like the confidence of this young lady. These are typical examples of homemade technologists in Nigeria that are actually doing very, very well and are not part of the school of thought of the Japa syndrome, that always, feels top down on the country and makes it look as if going abroad is like going to paradise.
I hope that this story inspires you like it has inspired me.
When I started Paga in 2009, there really was no tech ecosystem at all.
There was no ecosystem, at least to my knowledge. If there was, it was very, very, it was very latent. It was definitely bubbling at the time. So at the time when I started, I was here in sort of southeast London. I actually travelled for the first time to Lagos in, if I believe I'm right, April 2010. I then moved to Nigeria, Lagos, in 2010, October, November, and within 6 or 7 months, I'd seen that there were a handful of people who were doing things. The likes of the Japa mans of the world. At that time, Sim had just started. I can't remember what the name of it was called, but it was called something past that.
But at that time, first of all, there was very little by the way of early stage venture capital. So for instance, we tried to fundraise. There was no one really willing to take a risk. I mean, there was some venture, but it was very nascent, very niche. But also, we also then tried to raise debt, and obviously that was even harder. So the first thing that I think was a marker of that period was just the very nascent supply of venture capital to fund early stage companies or technology companies at the time.
Nobody knew what valuations were. At the time, venture capital was this new profession coming out of business school. So I just finished business school a few years before. And in a class of 200, they'd probably take like 2 people. So it was still a very closed and inaccessible industry. So it was pretty non-existent. So in 2009, I had no ambitions to create a startup or to work for a startup or to do anything with a startup. So it was still very nascent.
Tech was something that was just for some special people. It wasn't as mainstream, but it was full of a lot of geeks, a lot of people that write codes, a lot of people that want to go on some platforms and just bash each other by what API is.
But since 2014, when I started Andera, the reality was that the tech scene then was very, very different from what it is now. Before Andera, I actually worked more directly as soon as I came back from Canada to help build a company called Fora. And that was really my first real foray into the tech scene.
Now, this is a returnee from Canada. Previously, we've seen returnees from the United Kingdom. The media, the mainstream media, sometimes they overhype this issue of immigration. I can at least confidently say that the ratio or percentage of immigrants to these foreign countries is just less than 5%. Nigeria still remains the most populous country in Africa and with the highest number of youths. Okay, so those of them that are going are, they always make more noise than those who are coming back. Those who are coming back, they come back in a very quiet way and they establish themselves. So the make believe is that people are actually dumping Nigeria, whereas they are not, in the real sense of it.
Most people in the tech community could fit into the 6th floor of CC Hub. And
I think this guy is the creator of, he's the founder of Flutterwave. Yes, this guy currently speaking.
A lot of us actually just met on the 6th floor of CC Hub and have continued to remain good friends ever since.
Most of the roles we know today didn't even exist then. There was clearly no identity infrastructure, which is pretty much the foundation of doing business on the internet. available was also limiting. So I'd say at the beginning it was exciting because the internet had come to Nigeria, the mobile phone was getting to the hands of people, but it was also very limiting because of the absence of talent and infrastructure.
Even though there were startup founders, if somebody was a founder in Lekki and you were a founder in VI, there was no avenue for you to meet, right? So, but because I had this mailing list, and because I was on TechCrunch and my blog post on Business Insider went far, and the Nigerians were like, "Hey, black guy on TechCrunch, I'll follow him," or whatever it is. I would email him and stuff. That's how I met Inyi and Machi and quite a number of people. Because of that, I had, will I say, the first and early mailing list of startup people that are interested in startups. Then, of course, some of the things I did on Hacker News went popular. That's how I met Shola and a few other people on those communities. So when I came back, I held arguably the first startup meetup in October 2010, right, in 4 points. Then I met Sim Shagaya, I met Loy. Loy used to run Startups Nigeria. Then I met Shola.
It was sort of like early 2011 when I actually attended the first ecosystem event. It was organized by OO, and for the first time I met Sim there. Sarah Lacey's TechCrunch was in Nigeria, just writing and reporting. I met the founders of Japa. I met the founders of a few companies. I can't actually remember the names of the companies because they don't really exist anymore, but I do remember some of the founders that I met then. I think Sim was definitely the big standout person who I guess went on to build a big part of the foundation of what we know to be at least the internet services ecosystem in Nigeria.
So in 2012-2013, I had to work with startups at Etisalat, and at the time, what that role required was for Etisalat to partner with smaller companies in the content, media, gaming space to try to deliver their products to Etisalat's roughly 20 million subscribers at the time. So that job essentially entailed finding commonality, which was us looking for products or content that consumed our core connectivity services, whilst also providing opportunities for startups to grow their customer base for their products. So I think for me, just trying to find a meeting of minds between such small companies and big companies relatively was pretty interesting. But it also showed me how partnership can be a route to scale.
To now cement it all, Main One came in with connectivity to the rest of the world. Not that it didn't exist, but it didn't exist the way they brought it.
So I think first and foremost, Main One, Auntie Funke was very proactive in engaging with local startups and essentially providing them with broadband. Again, if you look at Irocco's first few years, we actually couldn't upload our content directly to YouTube. It was just too expensive and just took too long, right? So in the end, I literally had to put somebody on a plane with a hard drive, fly them to the Google offices. I think it was in Victoria at the time or somewhere like that, and they would essentially have to sort of load it directly from Google's offices. The first time Auntie Funke from Main One heard that, she was like, "Look, that's ridiculous. We have capacity. Let's figure something out." And she gave us a really great discount to enable us to start actually building from within Lagos and Nigeria, right?
And to make it all hang out, we had our first fintech in InterSwitch that brought the banks together, making payment online something of reality.
In those days, if you wanted anything to your bank, from a bank or your bank or your account officer, you just have to take that trip to that bank, There's no other way. And it was that difficult. Now, I find it so lazy, even sometimes going to the mall. But in those days, you have to go. Now, in those days, if you wanted internet banking, you would go to the bank, and they have to set you up there. They have to give you your password. You see your password. If things went wrong, you won't have any ways to solve the problem. If you wanted a card, you could take weeks to get your cards, and if you lost your card, it would take weeks to get it replaced, and still have to get to the bank. But that was the way it used to be. And even despite the fact that looking back right now, I feel very kind of anti-diluvian or very ancient, it was still a big deal, because even for those banks doing those things those days, it's still way and beyond the older generation banks. So it was difficult.
The second thing that was very difficult at that time was really building any kind of business that needed to process payments online. This was really
You know, I mean, there were some providers, but it wasn't very effective. To be honest, didn't work very well, or hardly ever worked. There wasn't yet an acceptance of technology as a way of doing things, per se, at a mainstream level, right? People were still very reluctant. Even if you could collect payments online, people were very reluctant to make payments online. Connectivity wasn't where it was today. I mean, I remember when we built our first LMS, our biggest consideration was, will people have bandwidth to stream the videos, you know? And so we had to chunk the lectures into like less than 5 minutes, and we had to build caching technology. There was all this stuff we had to do because we were in those times, right? So it's a different world we live in today. Yep.
Remember, I'm talking of base foundations happening, and none of this happened in one fell swoop. This is a trajectory you've asked me of over the last 10 years.
So tech has helped me become a creator. It has helped me to really realize what it truly means to be a creator. I work in product management, so I'm able to bring ideas to life by working with people, so it's really great. Tech gives me the freedom to express myself in the work that I'm doing, and also gives me freedom to work how I like.
I think the most impact that we've had is that technology has democratized filmmaking. And by democratizing filmmaking, it's given access to as many creative people as possible.
Another thing would be money. I mean, startups generate, like you've seen, money in a short time because of the value they create as well. So yeah.
Tech in my life has been life-changing. I discovered tech when I was 21, and I was a makeup artist. And I transitioned from being a makeup artist to being a product designer working in Lagos, Nigeria at Flutterwave. And in a few years, I have been able to move to a new city, the city of my dreams in London, living by myself, having access to so many amazing people that I wouldn't have met if I was still living in Festac, Nigeria, I guess. So tech has been really good.
Technology has opened up my world in a way that, I don't know, it wouldn't have ordinarily done. I've been able to meet a lot of amazing people. I've been able to work on challenging things.
I mean, I've gone from being a DJ and working on radio over the last 5 years to growing my career as a social media executive, content lead, and then heading a content team.
I would say it has given me access to quite a lot of people and places.
I mean, tech has given me like a platform, an audience to express myself, you know, to share the things I know, and just to meet amazing people that, I mean, without tech, I wouldn't have the opportunity to meet them.
Tech has unlocked a new level of seamlessness in all areas of my life. So whether that be day-to-day savings, investments, finding beautiful locations to take pictures, I just think the impact is wide and has provided ease for me.
Yes, I definitely would say that tech has influenced the rise of the creator economy in Nigeria. I mean, for starters, we talk about smartphone penetration. The creator economy is really hinged on more people being digitally connected online, and more smartphone growth makes this better.
I think the impact has been amazing in a bunch of different ways. So the impact has been both ways, to both startups and to telcos. I think to telcos, it has taught telcos how to integrate innovation into the mobile experience that they are providing to the users that they have had and maintained for the last 20-something years. And I think for startups, it's created a route to communicating with customers and scaling, right? So I think the impact has been a lot of growth, a lot of traction and adoption, a lot of an advancement, increased sophistication in the use of digital products. So I think it's definitely been a seminal event, if you can crush all those partnerships into one event. It's definitely very relevant.
No, I think it's natural. I think it's natural that tech would actually influence like all areas of our lives. The absence of tech right now before was an anomaly. Right? Nigeria came very late to the party. So the importance of tech in your life is drilled down to three things. A machine is something that saves you, time, energy, and resources. Tech does that, so you would adopt it anyway. There isn't any special reason why you do it. It's easier for you to move money on your phone than it is to go to the bank. Once you have a phone, you would end up doing it. See older people who used to be like, I don't want a card, I don't want to use the ATM, my mom has gone and put everything onto her phone. The biggest progress is she uses an iPhone now as well, so I don't think you really have a choice. When the world is moving, when progress is being made, then, you have early adopters, you have people that don't question, you have late adopters, but the common theme between everybody is that we don't adopt. Myself, Sunto, Josh, and the other four, Terry, IBK, and also an AY, kind of set out to build for us, right? It's very cliche, for millennials and Gen Z and the generation that comes after us. So we have always, every single idea that came, push CV, 500 dishes, 99 staff, all of them are all targeted at people like us and people that come after us, people who behave slightly different than the traditional, which is who we are, right? The smartphone generation, the people whose habits are different. So the why is, how do we sustainably make life better for our generation? The older generation have done very well for themselves, but not quite well for us. And so we decided that there's probably a chance somewhere, somehow, to build something that gives us the power. And we tried so many ideas before we finally kind of got Piggyvest, and that's been kind of an interesting journey.
6 months in, after moving back to Nigeria, I was even more convinced about the opportunity of starting something that solved a key problem that was in society. I wasn't sure quite what, but I spent about 3 months looking at different ideas before really honing in on what is now Paga. And really my frustration was that I was carrying cash everywhere with me. And for individuals or businesses trading in cash, all these weird processes were being created just to prevent the theft of cash. And for the first 6 months, I actually kept the idea quite under wraps. My friends knew I was working on something, but they didn't know exactly what it was, and I only talked to people who told people about it who needed to know.
Tayo Buso and I are friends. We go back a really long way, back to secondary school. And then he started working on this secret project, and I was like, well, what do you mean you're working on a secret project that you can't tell me about? That secret project turned out to be Paga. So this was 2009 was a very it was a pivotal time for the ecosystem, because I think people came back, we all came back, had jobs, but then a few of us saw the opportunities and started trying to convert those opportunities into startups.
I wouldn't say it was as clear as it is now at that beginning, but I think what was very clear was that people needed to have access to things, and we could be a company that used the internet to connect people to the things they needed access to. At the time, what was like oxygen for society then was airtime. Airtime was on the road, and I recall as a student in uni, I came to Lagos, and I experienced an accident actually in Japa. It's funny that that's now the tech hub. I actually experienced an accident in Japa. I saw an orca who was like chasing a bus, was trying to sell airtime on the road. Airtime was sold on the road at the time, and the car hit the person, and it was really a messy situation. And I think our boss stopped. They tried to help. I was just sitting in the car. I couldn't even move. I was literally in shock. Seeing that, and I started to think about why would a person's business be chasing cars in a bit to make a living? And was there a different way people could access this thing called airtime? And I would say at the time we built, so our very first product was a platform to make airtime available online.
We lived in a society where young people were unemployed because they weren't learning skills that were relevant to global economy. And at the end of the day, just understanding that was at the heart of really building a system, a new model of education that could fix that and help things grow. And I mean, for the first time, I would say I came to the realization that there's real value in a great education, right? In the sense that if you get a great education and you learn in truth, you will be able to create value. You will be able to make money. And yeah, I think for me that was what became the why. I mean, over time, the why evolved, right? So at first it was about the jobs, then it was about building this new generation of technology leaders that would take on the country's challenges. And I think we're starting to see quite a bit of it now with a lot of Adema alum in critical positions across different markets.
Flutterwave, we literally couldn't exist if Flutterwave didn't exist. So we built on Jala's payment infrastructure, and they've made it easy for us to be able to move money in and out. So yeah, by the way.
So for Piggyvest specifically, there will be the launch of Paystack. That was very important. That tech, without it, we would have had a harder time getting people to save daily or weekly or monthly.
So many startups just came up because those payment companies made payments at least more accessible.
I think the company that I was really inspired by, seeing what they were doing and how they had been able to build something tangible within this market, interestingly, was Secure ID. So Kofa Kikube. And I actually went out to visit her facility. Most people don't know her, most people don't know her company, but if you have a smartphone or any phone in Nigeria, you use her product. If you have a SIM card, if you have a debit card in Nigeria, you use her product. And I was like, how has this company been able to build a world-class processing facility to manufacture these things in Nigeria and scale it out? The other company, of course, I knew of was InterSwitch. And I think there, my view was more just to understand how they broke into the tech, into the financial services landscape. And so in both cases, I reached out, cold calls, went to meet executives of both companies, and asked a lot of questions, and really just tried to understand what others have done, even if my path was going to be different from theirs.
I think the very number one for me will be InterSwitch. InterSwitch literally set the foundation for most of what is happening today. They made us see that it was possible to orchestrate and to innovate and to automate, and pretty much advance us into a new world.
At the time, the jewel or the darling was InterSwitch, and when people, you would spend a bit of time looking at sub-Saharan Africa, and very quickly the company that many venture capital firms would land on was InterSwitch. There were other payments business. There was a business called Emerging Markets Payments Holdings that was doing credit card processing, etc. in Nigeria. There were businesses in South Africa that were sort of approaching that kind of scale, but you're right that in the Nigeria ecosystem there weren't that many.
Without InterSwitch, there was no foundation, right? And the first setup that connected the banks and all that.
But CC Hub was one of the startups, one of the ecosystem enabler, because at least we had our first office. Then there was another platform called Idea Hub, which was created by the government to support an ecosystem building activities.
No, the first set of people that made things happen was CC Hub, right? CC Hub gave us a place, right? So without CC Hub, we would not have had a place.
There was a few key players that you would still recognize. So the likes of, say, CC Hub was really central to everything, and they incubated some of the early startups.
Funke Okwiki, of Main One, I think she pushed the boundaries.
So she has to have solid props. I remember when Fiber launched, and I was in ShopRite and downloading like a beast. But I think those cables coming in helped create opportunity for there to even be something called the market. Yeah. So that's going back. I would add that.
Yeah, when I think about the time when we started Child Hub, I think one of the things that inspired us at the time was that we saw folks like Mark Essien at Hotels.ng, Oliyomi at Paintivo, who had built businesses, hard businesses actually. Hotel business is not an easy business to build and to convert into an online business. A design business is not an easy business. A printing business, rather, is not an easy business to build. And we thought the food business is not also easy. However, if these folks have been able to kind of achieve that, then we can as well achieve that. But I think more importantly was just the sheer willingness to actually solve problems. And I think looking back, the folks that actually pioneered.
And what this guy is saying is absolutely correct. The desire to solve problems could be the way to even riches, unlimited riches. As you can see now, so far so good. This documentary has touched on several startup companies in Nigeria. You want to talk of Paystack, you want to talk of InterSwitch, and so on and so forth. So many of these guys just came in to solve problems, and from there they scaled up, and today they are successful, much more successful than in any part of the world.
tech at the very beginning were more of like the biggest drivers for us as encouragement to actually build stuff.
I think that the biggest challenges that companies in Nigeria face is scaling. The traditional approach to achieving scale is to acquire and own the customer by yourself and for yourself. And I think that to try to do that in this environment takes a very long time and can be extremely expensive. The solution to that problem then is partnering for scale. But then because the common philosophy around customer ownership is that you must own your customer yourself, this frustrates a company's ability to partner with another company. Coupled with the fact that you're trying to do that in our environments which are low data, low infrastructure, and low trust, it's just really, really difficult. But when those partnerships find a way to work, I've seen the results be nothing short of amazing.
I think with Andera in particular, the biggest challenge was scaling infrastructure. We moved around a lot because we didn't have the right infrastructure for companies who were scaling to move to. So that's a big lesson, I think, from that challenge. And I think, ultimately it kept bedeviling the company because we had to make practical choices between training and working. And if you're a profit-driven company, it's very easy to make that choice, especially when you don't have a lot of space.
Funding was one of the hardest problems that all of us had to solve at that time. In 2013, 2014, a great, fantastic seed round was 25k, right? And so when we raised 25k, we were exceedingly happy. And then we raised the follow-on, I think it was 200k for Push CV, we were happy. But obviously you quickly run out of money. So a bunch of all of us, startups, even legacy ones, funding was one of the biggest challenges.
There was literally no venture capital available at the time. So it was just the capital we had. And we got capital in our early days actually from our very first customer. When I was in uni, I had done some project for someone while I was in uni. And when I finished uni, he literally just told me that, please make sure you don't get a job. And he gave me 50 million naira. So with 50 million naira in 2007, I literally could get a house, and we all stayed there for, I think the money ran for almost like over a year, attempting to figure out how do we solve problems.
I would say the biggest difficulty when we started Paga was the fact that there was still no venture investing in Africa or Nigeria. There were barely any angels. People didn't even know the concept of angel investing. Talk less of institutional capital, right? So it took us, I think it took us about 12 months to raise our seed round, and we raised $700,000 from, I think, probably about 20 people, right? And so that was a lot of conversations with people, and in fact, most of those people ended up being folks who are not in Nigeria, right? Who had seen investing in Silicon Valley and were able to say, okay, yeah, I know Tayo, I get the idea of what you're trying to do. I don't know Nigeria, but I'm going to take a bet on you, right? And so we're super grateful to all those people who invested and believed at such an early stage.
Yeah, I think investors have clearly played a critical role in the growth of this ecosystem. First of all, I think people need to understand what venture capital is meant for. When I built my company, or our company in 2010, there was no venture capital. So we bootstrapped. Now, bootstrapping basically meant we couldn't necessarily grow too fast because we had to watch our burn was essentially what we made. Like, there was nothing like measuring burn. If you didn't make money, you didn't have a business, right? But what venture does is, venture allows you sort of experiment, but it also allows you sort of grow fast, gain market share, and not necessarily have to worry as much about. Again, it's really an enabler of risk, right? And I think that's what venture has done for this ecosystem. It's allowed folks test out ideas, test out business models, because without doing that, people take minimal risk, and when you take minimal risk, you're not able to sort of push the envelope and push the barriers, as it were. And so from that standpoint, you can say venture is a catalyst, right? And that has enabled us build out this ecosystem.
So it's one thing to have an idea. It's an idea just like a spark. But for you to turn into wildfire, for you to turn into something big, you need fuel. And basically that's what they've done. So you see some angel investor, for example, is done significantly well. They help a lot of these young people to actually scale and turn their ideas into reality. And being a former VC myself, investing in companies is a very scary thing because you don't know which person is going to succeed. People think VC see into the future. They don't see into the future. They just have incredible belief and they are ready to take the risk and then see these things play out. So all the companies I've mentioned, from T-Map to Flutter to Paystar to AppZone, at one time the ideas didn't make sense. The ideas seem scary. Even those young people didn't sound so sure of themselves, they weren't to articulate. And then you have these VCs and investors and angels investing in them. In actual fact, the angels invested in them, saw them becoming successful even before the VCs came. But trust me, even with the availability of internet, even with millions of Nigerians having access to the internet, having phones, if these VCs or angels have not invested in any of this company, none of this will have happened because there will be no way for them to scale the ideas and reach millions of Nigerians or millions of Africans at the scale that we did.
The idea of venture back then was a rich uncle giving you money and telling you he was going to own 70% of your company and giving you 30% and giving you an option to buy back 20% to even get it to 50-50%, right? But that has changed in the last 5 years, right? Venture now, as we know it to be now, is investing in companies at the early stage, getting some form of equity and backing and supporting them with the resources that they need.
So it wasn't that you had to be super rich to now invest in startups. There was a creation, not a creation, but the significant growth in syndicates when it came to investing in startups. And so one thing I initially saw was a lot of people in the West who perhaps hadn't engaged with the ecosystem before, suddenly wanting to invest and throw their money and weight behind an African startup and an African ecosystem.
In the last sort of 5 to 6 years, it's kind of crazy what has happened in the ecosystem. So in the early days, it was very difficult for founders to get access to capital. So when we launched Microtraction at the time, we were one of the few investors that were backing entrepreneurs at the sort of very beginning of their journey. So one thing that has definitely changed is just in the amount. So when we launched 5 years ago, we used to write $15,000 checks into companies. Right now we invest $100,000 and we can sort of do a quick follow-on in around 350, right? So in 5 years we've gone from investing 15,000 to as much as 450K, and that just shows you the tremendous growth of the ecosystem.
If I have to look at 3 key moments in our ecosystem, I would say Andela, because of talent. What Andela has done for the market really created that route for young people to believe I can start a career with software.
I mean, Andela was big, and I think it was my first time of seeing us being able to try to solve the issue of tech talent at the scale. Whatever anybody feels about it now, right? But that was powerful for me.
The passing of the Nigerian Startup Bill at the National Assembly. I think people underestimate how critical that is.
I know a lot of us take it for granted, but you just need to understand how pivotal that is by just looking at the part that they want that government into electricity. So we have Nigeria, have so much internet, so much telephony, even dogs have phones in Nigeria, and then you see on the other side we can't just have electricity.
Then I remember EcoVC. It was EcoVC. They came to Nigeria, I don't know, maybe 2009 or 2008. They wanted to meet founders. Myself and Ezra met them at 4 Point. The feedback they constant feedback at the time from the investor space was that we were too early, the environment was not ready, they were worried about government regulation, policy changes. So we start getting into YC was a big moment that I would say accelerated things forward.
That was a very important moment for us.
Paving the way for several other companies to go into YC and ending up being the first true organic whole acquisition.
And then Flutter Waves, $1 billion vow, right? We saw a company build and get to $1 billion valuation right in front of us, and it showed that more unicorns can be built. And I think today in Nigeria I probably have about 7 of them.
Yes, but one of them I would say is probably Morocco raising the $3 million from Tiger Global. So that was 10 years ago, simply because it was just so much money from such an important, recognizable global VC as well.
Again, going back to Rocket Internet, I think Rocket Internet had a massive impact on Nigeria just in terms of the sheer amount of money that they poured into the market, right? I think the challenge with that is that a lot of the venture capital which should have gone much more broader amongst the ecosystem actually ended up going to that one company, right? And that company just wasn't really focused too much on unit economics, wasn't really focused on building sustainability. We're very much sort of like, burn $20-30 million and just try something else if it doesn't work. So I think that kind of created some pretty bad economics for certain segments, right? So if we look at real estate has largely not worked out in Nigeria in a traditional sense. Classifieds haven't really worked out in a traditional sense. If you look at even something as simple as hotels, it's a market which is there, an opportunity which is there. It's pretty much worked in every country around the world, but it just hasn't really worked in Nigeria yet. I think a lot of that goes back to the lack of investment in those particular verticals outside of what Rocket Internet was doing. So I think that's first and foremost. I think secondly, obviously, the telcos and their ability to scale the distribution of internet, right? So again, I think we're still very early in the internet sort of penetration story in Nigeria.
If you want to talk about the meeting of telco and tech, I actually, they're not as far apart as we like to draw those lines in Africa, but we have a particularly significant opportunity here in Africa, right? So I often joke that telcos are the original tech bros.
And this is a fact that this woman is talking about here. There are far much more opportunities here in Africa than in all of these countries that the Japa people keep talking about. But let's just hope that God will open their eyes to see the real treasure, and the greener land, and not just burn the bridges between the greenest land and the land at a distant place
on the continent, because telcos have been the bedrock of everybody's connectivity. There is no other route to digital connectivity outside of infrastructure that a mobile telecom company has provided, right? So in other developed markets, there may be national telecom companies who have provided fiber infrastructure, and they may be separate from mobile telecom companies. They may even be customers. They may even have mobile telecom companies as customers. But in Nigeria and in Africa, they are usually one and the same.
The telcos started making internet to become very available. In those days, you only have access to the internet at work because it's always too expensive to have it by yourself. I remember the first time I used internet, it was super expensive. Then it became easier, so that was when BlackBerry also came around. You could browse from your BlackBerry phone, and it was kind of a little bit affordable.
I pride myself in being the first person that anybody that wanted to partner with a telco called in Nigeria for there was a 5-year period. And so I'm very, very proud of that, and the fact that Etisalat was so open to partnership, being the challenger telco at the time. It was a very exciting and innovative time for both sides. Just the possibilities and the excitement that came out of that.
I feel like, for the first time, I think the visit of Mark Zuckerberg just opened people's eyes to how the world saw them in a way that perhaps most other events hadn't. And I think people just started to really believe in their ability to build incredible companies, and I don't think we've slowed down from that.
Nigerian ecosystem moved from 2 to 98 just because Mark Zuckerberg came. The impact wasn't even as much as when people knew that he was around. because they didn't talk about it, and everybody was googling everything. So it was really good. That was the moment. Then also when Jack Dorsey came to to Nigeria, we were the one that posted him, and it was really an interesting story. Twitter is always a cool company to work with. So those two parties coming to Africa really changed the narrative. You can't build really well or build an ecosystem without media. TechCrunch was one of the platforms that built the entire Silicon Valley ecosystem. The same with what TechPoint and TechAbat did in this market. Because you need story. People need to understand what's going on. People need to be excited. People need to be angry.
Right, so it's like telling the positive and negative stories, because as media, you can't just tell positive stories and, allow everyone to just feel good about themselves. It's also holding founders, investors accountable for, how this ecosystem is being positioned or how people perceive, shift perspectives of the ecosystem, right? Also international publications like Quartz, like Rest of World, like TechCrunch, right, they've played a massive role in telling African stories. Also local publications like Disrupt Africa, WeTrack, and the likes.
So the coverage of the ecosystem has changed a lot in the past 7 years. At about 2014, 2015, you had a few really thoughtful pieces about the business side of things, the ecosystem itself. You had very many gadget blogs, many gadget reviews, things like that. You had startup feature pieces, where you'd spend 4 paragraphs just, giving the reader a good sense of what a company is and what they're here to do. As more capital started to flow into the ecosystem in the past couple of years, the mix shifted significantly towards fundraising press releases, which everybody then started to complain about. And now I think we're about to enter an era where there's much more of a focus on journalism, and people are actually trying to figure out what's happening at these bigger companies, what the impacts are they having, is there any wrongdoing happening in the ecosystem?
It's easier, I would say, to capture the imagination of journalists than it was, say, in 2012. I remember when I first started at Irocco, and I was super keen, and I was pitching international journalists this amazing story. Jason Njoku, dynamic character, he'd raised money from international investors, and he was plowing it back into Nollywood. He was bringing Nollywood online. A really, really genuinely very interesting story. But I remember pitching some Silicon Valley-based journalists, and they said, "Oh, we're not going to write about Nigerian fraudsters, internet fraudsters." That was their response. Now, that was only 10 years ago. So the amount of work that we've had to do to validate and to tell the story of African tech has been long, and it's been...
Let me just put this, at this juncture, let me just put this inputs. This lady is trying to give a narrative that she met some people and just to promote Iroko TV, only for them to respond that they're not going to write about Nigerian fraudsters. Well, some people have stereotypes, and those stereotypes sometimes are erroneous. Like the lady actually went through, for a genuine cause, and these guys just they bracketed every activity in Nigeria as fraudster. You still have such stereotypes even on the social media, but I'm so happy that they got their validation from elsewhere, and Iroko TV was eventually successful without the input of those people she initially approached.
Arduous, and it's really been about sort of storytelling and having case studies and showing people that actually the continent is harnessing and incubating.
And let me also state this, that there is in every society there are good and bad. Those people abusing the internet as Nigerians and defrauding people, their time is coming when they will give account of such activities. But you out there should not, if you look at the percentage of people that do these things, they are just less than perhaps 10% of the Nigerian population. Okay, there are several other people, like as you can see from this documentary now, The Rise of Tech in Nigeria. You can see that there are so many people with much more productive approaches to the internet and technology, for the fact that Meta AI or Facebook's founder and the former Twitter founder came to Nigeria, it shows that there are people that actually identify with the potential of Nigerian startups and companies, all right, tech companies, which provide services and, of course, employment to Nigerians.
Some genuinely really interesting businesses, tech companies as well, and of course a massive wealth of talent. So the journey has been hard but interesting along the way.
I see a lot of founders now, or a lot of people coming to bash the media, and you've forgotten that these are the people that really built your company. Because your first story, nobody will talk about you on the global stage if no one is talking about you on the local stage. Most startups have seen their story first on Tech Point, on Tech Hub, and now they will be bashing these people. Meanwhile, whenever they want to do recommendation for visa or something, they're still going to their story to pack it together. So the media role is very important, and if you see it from that angle, you will appreciate the effort the people that built media put into this.
The storytelling's been critical for helping people get in front of new investors, and now more so than ever talent as well. You know, if you're trying to attract international talent, you're looking to, you need to build up your profile. So when someone applies for a job with you, they're going to Google you, they're going to go on your LinkedIn, they're going to find out, if you're a good employer, if people are saying good things about you, if they're saying bad things about you, if you've raised money. I think especially a lot of the companies who are looking to attract talent from, say, the US, if they're trying to get people to move back, they need to prove that they're VC backed. You're not going to leave like a very well-paid job getting paid in dollars to come back to Nigeria necessarily unless you know this company can sustain you. So I think that the storytelling part of it, I think a lot of people who are coming into these companies now, also they're looking to be inspired as well, but they're looking for something fresh.
The media plays an image-making role. So most of the founders we have today may not have been founders if they did not see themselves represented in the media, and that's an important thing that we should continue to promote.
So many stories have to be told. We don't tell our stories, and I think there are a lot of stories that have to be told. Talent, for example, how talent has grown.
Talent in Nigeria and Africa has grown in an unprecedented way.
For a lot of talent here in working in startups, you have to wear a lot of hats, and so you have to know a lot of things to really function in your role. And so I think, we're able to really take on a lot of stuff, and that really helps even competing globally.
We need to appreciate the amount of growth that we've seen in this space, and that is largely owed to the people that got into the space early and how much they've tried to bring up other people in this space.
In recent years, technical innovations have been transforming life on the continent of Africa.
In the 90s, Nigeria was heavy on software. I think those type of stories haven't been told enough.
A lot of very interesting enterprise technology companies solving out real problems for enterprises, but then they're not sexy. They're not sexy to talk about, so nobody really talks about them. But I really like them because they're profitable.
It feels like a lot of people have just shown up and have completely forgotten how to sort of pay homage to the bedrock. The skyscraper doesn't exist without the marvel that happens on the ground. So you marvel at everything above ground, but you have no idea that without the stuff on the ground, the above ground doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually happen. And I think, that's partially the reason why I like what you're doing, because there's so many folks that, bled, sweated, cried to pull all this stuff together, right? And then you sort of see these things and, no one has any memories. But it is a good thing because these things need to be put down for posterity. But I think Paystack is a story that needs to be told. And not only just Paystack. I would say Paystack, I have to give props to Flutterwave because, and GB, bad guy, right? Very, very, very critical.
Yeah, I remember Stripe. Stripe is an Irish company, and they became venture capitalists to Paystack. That payment company started by two graduates from Nigeria, and ever since they invested, they've transformed Paystack, and they've become so big. And the amount of capital pushed into Paystack company, it's just so very, very much, because I keep wondering that a lot of people that immigrate to these Western countries, that they've not been able to raise that kind of capital. Let's be very honest. they've not been able, and they can't, not even in a thousand years, they can raise that kind of capital. So you can see that there's more opportunity here in Africa, all right, precisely and particularly Nigeria, than out there that people keep talking about as if it's overhyping, because a lot of Africans that go out as immigrants to this country. Recently, I heard about one that was doing some kind of ridiculous job there, and the kind of money that was being made. When you interview such people, they will keep telling you, "Do you know what I went through to get this money?" When you begin to hear those kind of phrases, just know that these guys have gone through the wrong side of the employment or the labor market.
For the stack, those guys, if there's something like GCON or GCFR, two of those guys should get something, because without them, there's no fintech industry. None. Zero. Nothing at all. So, of course, people want to say, "Oh, people shoulders of giants," and people normally talk of interswitch before interswitch. Then I said, why don't you go back to what do you call it, Blood Regard? Because without him, there will be no different people that started First Bank. So but again, like I said, you'll see where there's an uptick, right? So interswitch, Michelle did something amazing, 2001. But if you're looking at the graph, there's an uptick and it's growing, and nothing would have happened if not this spike. And this spike has opened up everywhere, right? So I think that story hasn't been told enough. I don't think that story has been told enough.
It's whether the stories. So right now, most of the stories being told are really to support valuations and to support the venture capital investments and flow coming into Nigeria. I think the biggest challenge right now is that, one, the size of the market which the venture capitalists are funding, is it really there? And I think that is probably the biggest challenge we're going to have over the next few years. And what impact does it have on the sustainability of our companies, right? So I think that the biggest challenge, which I think is largely being told right now, is how sustainable are some of these companies as they try to hack their way to growth by giving away value for free, really, really peculiar and wonky unit economics. And I think that sort of goes to the heart of the fintech boom, right? What do you need to do to justify raising $100 million at $1 billion valuation, right? You need to justify massive growth, you need to justify massive things.
Okay, I believe we have some enterprise technologies companies that are making very, very good, very tons of money, and nobody's talking about those companies because enterprise technology is not sexy, right? Everybody wants to talk about the sexy stuff and the shiny apps. But I think at the end of the day, people need to make money, right? And companies are built to make money and create impact.
I think the first one I'll tell is Abzone. Well, I'm not related to their friends. I know them, but I think they don't get enough credit for some of the things they've done. So, for example, before the likes of Flutter with Paystack, Abzone have actually built what we call CIPG, which is similar to what we use right now, ability to buy and sell online using cards. But this predates the time when everybody could build business in the cloud. So
let me just mention one thing at this juncture too, that I could remember when the internet came into Nigeria. Nigeria was really faced with a lot of challenges, and these payment platforms that eventually came in, like InterSwitch, Paystack, Flutterway, these guys actually helped immensely to cushion the effect, all right, of the discrimination that Nigerians were facing on international payment platforms. All right, I wouldn't want to mention names, but everybody knows how a very popular payment platform kept turning down Nigerian transaction or cards issued in Nigeria. But today, all that is history, and they themselves are now striving to even come into the Nigerian ecosystem.
Sold this technology to banks, and that was the foundation of airlines like Arik, like AirP, being able to sell tickets online.
Generally, and this might not be a particular point in time, but just seeing black founders backing other black founders, I think is very key to highlight here. Not many times do you see a lot of black people, especially on the continent and especially in Nigeria, actually investing in other black founders. It's always a lot of white folks investing as well, and obviously that's fine, but we want to see more black people invest. And the fact that you can now see founders who started companies 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago investing.
I agree with this guy. Representation matters. It's very, very important.
and other black founders is something to highlight as, you know, a very, very impactful moment in the life of the ecosystem at large.
Historically, the role of women has kind of been muted in tech. There's been a few outliers, you know, the more like women you know, but if you like took a sample size of 10 tech founders, maybe like 2 years ago, you have maybe 8 men, 2 women. The women were mostly operators, but over the past 2 years, we're now seeing a 4x increase in the number of operator-turned founders that happen to be women.
When I started creating content a few years ago, most of my followers were male because at the time we had more designers who were men. But in the last 2 years, my ratio has turned from 70-30 men-women to 70-30 women-men, and it has just been very interesting for me to see that firsthand. So I would say that the community is really growing.
I think there's work for us to do as women in amplify the voices of women so that there is more noise about the women that are currently in tech and the current opportunities that there are in tech for women.
I would say the very first one that comes to my mind is the BVN, identity infrastructure. Pretty much, I would say, maybe has had the most impact in my view. The banks facing a challenge, a national challenge, which was, who are we? How do you even identify someone if you want to do business with them online? And solving that problem pretty much gave back to, along with others, pretty much give back to what we can call an ecosystem today. A number of companies are built around even the entire BVN idea. So after the policy on BVN was a really big one. I think it was Sanusi Lamido, that was the central bank governor at the time. And I followed him keenly. I think he did an excellent job in convincing banks, convincing society that we needed to all own a BVN. I think that was a really important one.
I think setting up of NIBS has made a significant impact in the ecosystem. I think also I would also sort of credit some of the work CBN did in providing guidance around the different regimes of licensing, whether they be for mobile money operators or payment PSSPs. Because there was a period where people just didn't know what license they needed, right? But when that became sort of obvious and clear, people could then approach the regulator to apply for a license. That I think has also been really helpful. Some would argue that BVN has also been beneficial from a KYC standpoint.
So normally when you talk of open banking or jurisdictions, you need it sits on 3 pillars. You need privacy, you need a regulation that declares open banking, and then you need a standard. So the privacy in Nigeria is codified with the regulation from NITA, which is NDPR, right? And that's already in place. That came out in 2019. And then you have the second one, which is the regulation. Basically, this is the regulation that says, let there be open banking, or all banks must have open banking. That came out from CBN in February 2021. And then this year, we have the third leg, which is basically the standard, what describes what needs to be done, right? And if you notice that the biggest part, right, which is the 2 regulations from the central bank, then if you look at CBN itself, before open banking, they've had a number of policies that literally shape Nigeria to become the leader in fintech or in financial technology across Africa and even probably in developing worlds. So you see the CBN have cashless policy, you see the CBN have standard and policy for things like USSD. You see that the CBN, I know people don't like this, but CBN actually puts in so much effort to ensure that financial services over using fintech is affordable. You've seen them crash the price of transfer, for example, from 100 naira for transfers to 10 naira, which makes it easier and reasonable for everyday Nigerian to do transactions. So I would say, yeah, those are some of the big policies.
I think it was very important when the government stated that it was going to create sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes. So the CBN said it was going to create regulatory sandboxes for fintech. I think that was a very big win for fintech, because what it meant was this constant tension that we had faced, and we still face to a certain extent, between financial services industry and infrastructure, and what some of the founders are trying to do by taking move first, break fast, or whatever approach, that sort of sandbox moment was an acknowledgement that actually the two things could not necessarily coexist, and it was a best practice move around sort of creating an environment in which founders could move fast and break things. Now, I don't know how many companies have then taken advantage of it, but I thought that was actually a pretty significant time. There have been a couple of times. There have been times that if one looks back, one might say that they were points of tension, but I actually think they were pretty important points. For example, in the recent past, there was a tussle between the CBN and SEC, frankly, over crypto. And the CBN was saying, effectively, I don't have the power to regulate crypto, and I don't have the power to regulate crypto operators, but I can make it near impossible for you to operate. And SEC, for all intents and purposes, came out saying, well, so far no one's actually broken any SEC regulations and SEC rules. And wait and see the extent to which we consider, depending on what you're all about to do in crypto, depending on, we'll see to what extent we consider some of these stuff securities. And again, that moment for me was quite important because it was SEC as a regulator saying we view innovation in general as actually quite positive in an ecosystem that is trying to sort of create value and deliver value. So actually, let's wait and see. And it was a watershed moment in that I think as an ecosystem we had expected regulators and government agencies to often kind of fall down on the side of just making it impossible to do certain things, and that actually didn't happen in that moment.
The regulators have, especially the SEC and the Central Bank of Nigeria, who are the key regulators for many of the fintechs, and you see that fintech is a huge category in terms of kind of companies we're building, right? You see over 30 or 40% of venture funding going into that space, and the key regulators there being SEC and the Central Bank. I think some of the forward-looking regulators, like in some cases, have then created an environment where people can try things, sandboxes, and enabling regulation for some of these companies to build. I know many folks talk about, hey, the regulator comes, is bringing the hammer, they are not helping many of the startups. But today, if one of the regulators actually uses their might, right, and come down harder than we seem to perceive on each of these companies, there'll be no ecosystem. So I think we're seeing a lot of policies that are helping startups grow. I think they can be better with more collaboration between the industry and regulator. I think secondly would be the Nigerian startup bill that's been presented. There's a lot of work being done by the ecosystem and NIDA that's the regulator for technology to build out a bill that works for both regulators and innovators.
Perhaps more recently, when Nigeria's payment regulation was the first to do it on the continent. Now we have cryptocurrency regulation, digital assets regulation. We have regulation around the Nigerian startup bill. So Nigerian policymakers have actually done an interestingly decent job at preparing the tech ecosystem for the consequences of scale. It's not always been properly applied. It's not always been easy to get to those compromises, but one has to commend them because they do far better than many other parts of Africa.
As of now, there's something called Startup Bill that has passed, hopefully to be signed into law, and it's a first step, and this was an industry-led initiative. Of course, we didn't get everything we wanted, but it's a good start. So regulation is good, but regulation should not precede innovation.
The key policies that have affected how we build positively our stack, there is, one is regulation drafts keep getting evolved, right? The CBN specifically and the SEC release draft policies based on startup behavior. Now it's true that innovation will precede regulation, but I think that we've done a good job of modifying regulation to fit what we're seeing. We're not where we need to be by any standards, but we've made more progress than some other African countries. So a good example would be, I think, the PSSP license,
or the creation of the PSB license, or like, redrafting like the regulations for mobile money. There's a lot that's been done there, right? Now, the ones that I don't particularly agree with is capitalization of microfinance, because it makes it more expensive for startups to kind of buy microfinance licenses. But that's like one of the lowest hanging fruits to start with. I know that like there's probably reasons behind it, but it's more limiting than like encouraging. Another thing is the SEC, for instance. In February last year, we had like a ban on crypto from participating in banking infrastructure. I think it was 2 months ago, the SEC released a draft on digital currency. So we're making progress there as well. It's not like we're not big speediness, but I think that like some progress is better than no progress at all.
I think in terms of impact on our ecosystem, if we were to take one bullet, it would be for me the LSETF. And what the LSETF has done and the way they've gone about executing it, and I'm starting to see, I'm not surprised because the guy behind LSETF ended up in Osun State, so we're starting to see that come out of Osun. But yeah, that initiative, thumbs up, because it went to the heart of the matter, put the money in the hands of the executors, and of course they get the results. So again, we're seeing other Lagos State agencies and ministries follow suit. So we have Innovating Lagos, we have the Science Research and Innovation Council, and other initiatives along those lines. At the federal level, we have to give credit where credit is due, and the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy have gone out of their comfort zone for the first time with the startup bill. And what do I mean by that? I mean proactively engaging the ecosystem, more importantly actually listening, okay, and reacting to inputs from the ecosystem. That's unusual, and I have to give them credit for that.
I would say that definitely over the last administration, they've been much more reactive than proactive in terms of supporting Nigerian startups, especially around things like the crypto ban, the Twitter ban, social media and its impact, broadcasting things. So yeah, around the crypto ban, everything else like that, I think there's definitely been some negativity. But with that said, one of the most amazing things I say about Nigeria is that that same regulatory, which can be really harsh, is actually pretty light touch as well. There were so many things in fintech that we built in Nigeria that you couldn't build in Ghana, you couldn't build easily in South Africa, you couldn't really build in most places in the world. So that ability, or in Africa even, so that ability to be like rapid, just to create things and put them out there, and if the regulators come, then you figure that out afterwards. That kind of like snappiness, that sort of ambition, that aggressiveness, I think has definitely like made Nigeria one of the innovation capitals of Africa.
After investing in a lot of startups, you kind of realize that there are some fundamental and sort of structurally broken things when it comes to the African economy, and it's not enough for us to build a solution on top of that, to actually create like scale and the type of solutions that we need. We have to think about things from first principles and from the ground up.
The evolution of the ecosystem is the inconsistency. Not to sort of like be a bearer of bad news, but in the end we've had huge enthusiasm met with a degree of despair, and things taking longer than they needed to take or have been required to take. We've had very few liquidity windows, which means that unless something changes by 2025, 2026, we'll essentially really be back where we were in 2010 when we started, right? It will be an AC ecosystem. People would have earned billions of dollars and not really seen a return. And, it then goes to say, where will the future funding come from? We've had European funding, we've had, big corporate funding from the MTNs and NASPERS, etc., the Goldmans, etc., the Access, etc. of the world. We've had that funding, didn't work. We're now obviously in a trough where we're seeing lots of, Silicon Valley, US funding. Again, if that works, then that money doesn't come back, right? Unless we start to see big, massive exits where people are making like, I'm talking about late stage investors, they're making like 10, 15, 20 times their money. Why would they invest in 2025, 2026? So I feel that like at the same time as we're trying to drive this VC story, we at the same time need to drive the story of sustainability, where companies companies can individually serve their customers, make them happy, create real value, capture real value, and obviously sort of like start to build real jobs and real sustainability in our ecosystem. Right now what we have is inconsistency, and I definitely feel that we need to address that core issue, otherwise nothing really matters.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that is clearly obvious is that technology startup ecosystem is now becoming mainstream across the country and across the continent. And you can see that in a number of ways. Today, we see every time a politician is giving a speech, they want to mention or they want to highlight a sign of hope or signs of hope. Technology companies get called and their founders who are seeing the influence of our technology ecosystem even in the music space, you know, where musicians are now sponsoring or acting as brand ambassadors for technology brands. Technology companies are now even starting to be a segment for the advertising industry. You know, I mean, across Lagos, you'll be blind not to notice all the billboards that are promoting various technology companies, particularly the fintechs. Financial inclusion is another thing to highlight. There's been tremendous improvements in access to financial services, and a lot of this progress has been driven by fintechs, whether they be the agency banks like Timapt or Kudi or Crowdforce or the several many others that we have. So this ecosystem is no longer focused on a few young people in Japa or Lekki. We are in fact making an impact on the country and the continent. And not just in the areas I've mentioned, you're also seeing how this ecosystem is becoming a force to reckon with when it comes to activism and even, holding government accountable.
My favorite tech product of all, Piggyvest.
I think that you can't talk about savings in Nigeria without mentioning Piggyvest.
The amazing thing about it is the fact that it makes saving really simple. It allows me to save to a certain target.
So we have the e-commerce. I think companies like Jumia and Konga sort of paved the way for e-commerce experience. So people sort of understand how they can actually shop online and buy from anywhere.
And then there's Paystack Commerce as well, which is such a brilliant product because it helps like businesses just set up like a store very easily.
Paystack is one of my favorite Nigerian or African tech companies.
If I try to pay for something and I see Paystack, it always fills me with confidence that the payment is going to go through without issues.
That's great. Now everybody's talking about Web3. I like that it's a crypto-native company.
They are investing and building products that help crypto become more accessible.
It's always been interesting to invest not just in Nigerian companies but in foreign companies, especially based in the US. And Bamboo made this easy for me. I would confess.
With technology, with this fintech app like Bamboo, it makes it easy. It kind of brings down the entry level or the barrier level. So there's low barrier to entry. Even with at least 10,000 naira, you can have access to the US stock market and start buying shares.
I would say old school. Old school is facilitating, giving policy educations to millions of people in Africa.
Lots of people are getting into tech. A lot of people want to get into tech. A lot of people are saying, everyone should get into tech. And I think that Old School is doing an incredible job at creating that pipeline for people.
Eating life for food, able to get food whenever you want to, and also plan how you want to eat your meals during the week. And food is recurring, so the fact that I could just use an app to do this just super amazing.
Rise Vest, very amazing. Helps me to invest in foreign stocks, foreign real estate. I particularly love two features, right? The one that comes with the wallet itself and the options of investing. Seller.
So that's a platform for creators to monetize their knowledge by digital products. So typically creators and sellers sell ebooks, courses, trainings, and just a variety of things.
I love Seller because it just helps African creators get paid.
One that I'm super bullish on for unicorn potential, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer, is Piggyvest. They have a very, very clear focus that their target customers are millennials and Gen Zs.
Of course, Paystack is part of Stripe, so I would say already a unicorn, and I would say Timapt as well. I'm banking on them. I think they are doing something very incredible.
Migo, definitely. There's a company called, an ad tech company called Terragon that I think is close. I think Terragon is very close. Thrive is probably on its way.
I think obviously Sim would come to mind in terms of someone who tried to inspire a new generation, tried to build for Nigeria first. Ultimately he failed because he just was out-capitalized. But I definitely feel like what he at least attempted to do had a big impact on that. Actually, I would say Shola and Ezra from Paystack.
Yeah, these two guys are actually the guys that founded Paystack, and you can see them. I have talked about them, I think, on one or two occasions in my previous videos. These are very typical examples of success in Nigeria. This same Nigeria that some other people they just keep, discarding, and I guess they are doing that out of, would I say, frustration or ineptitude, or what would we even go, or being myopic, or what better word are we going to use to describe that? So these guys, the kind of investment they made, they started it on themselves, and eventually they got funding from Stripe, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it's up to $300 million, because I remember reading that article on CNN. So who is out there now that is saying that it's impossible to make it in your homeland? You can make it right here in your homeland. You don't need to tie your success to a foreign land, because that is not how it works. That's not what God even has for anybody. What God has planned for everybody is to make it where you are, because He knows why He placed you there. So please never ever have the mindset that you cannot make it in Nigeria. You can make it in Nigeria, and you can as well make it abroad. Okay, but you can make it better in your home country.
You're a very, product focused, very deliberate, very sustainable culture at Paystack versus what everyone else then started to do afterwards. So definitely would say sort of Shola would be one of those key figures. Again, in a strange way, actually, I would say like OO, who's definitely worked tirelessly over the last decade to support the ecosystem, how he can, by obviously encouraging people to come into Nigeria, evangelizing, supporting startups. I would definitely obviously put OO there.
Lewis Edosi had a Metro NG. I forget his name. He was at GIC, and some of the guys, folks that came up later, at Xynox, right? Another one, and then she had this other woman who had a big, PC reseller business. Those are folks who sort of, were contributors to the bedrock. And then folks that added to that, folks like, Falabi and Yemi at Levo on the venture side, Mobola Johnson when she was in, the ministry, Tommy Davis, who's sort of been flying the flag forever.
Now I'm going to start with Leap, simply because Leap was founded by Ndidi Winelli, who, she's moved on and she now does a fund. And the reason I say that is because if you look at her trajectory, it also maps, okay? It's an indicator of the growth of the ecosystem itself. And you have similar things that have happened with those who at the beginning have been there. And then I talked earlier about the fact that we got infrastructure. Now the two key, who I call the infrastructure doyens, for me were Funke Opeke and what she did with Main One, bringing that cable in.
Auntie Funke was very proactive in engaging with local startups and essentially providing them with broadband.
With the funding from the likes of Oladiola and others, I think that was just the business. Add to that what Mitchell did, stitching the banks together to give us a digital payment switch. You start to understand why we could get the takeoff and why our startup captains could really do what they did. Who are the startup captains? Well, first among equals, you got Sim Shagaya. All right, Sim did Konga, he did Deal Day, he's now doing U-Lesson. Then you've got Jason Njoku. what he did with Iroko, what he did with Spark, and continues to do with Spark, and now he's doing Black Bear, and he's a serial.
I give an award to Jason Njoku to the extent that he did a couple of things. I think Iroko was the very first investment, for example, that a Tiger Global made in Nigeria, potentially even in Africa, I'm not sure. I also think that he did quite a bit of work with Spark, which was, I believe, a venture studio in the very early days, and that was really around a commitment to this to nurturing this nascent ecosystem. I think he continues to put out his thoughts on the growth of the ecosystem. I don't always agree, but I think it's important to have people that are thinking about things in that way.
These are, to me, the startup captains of Nigeria. But that's not taking anything away from the next lot, which are the entrepreneur angels. These are actual founders that they themselves have become investors and are investing in the next generation. And I'm talking of Tayo Vioso of Paga, of Marquesian, of hotels.ng. I mean, these two guys just rock. What Mark's doing, inspiring. I mean, I think last count, they trained something like 2,000 or God knows how many people in terms of developers. But again, they have their place. We then have the game changers. Who are the game changers? Well, they're my two running buddies. One's like a son to me. The others are real close. And that's Aboyaji.
My man right? He gets a lot of flack because oh God. But very, very critical.
When we started out, Andela was the first one he hit out of the park. Everybody now knows about Flutterwave. Look at what he's doing. Okay, with Future.Africa, look at what he's doing with the New Village. And as for Bosu,
from CC Hub, what he started out in Japa was one of the reasons why, when we started out, Lipa went out to Japa first. So Bosu has been a key player and is still a key player today, doing some of the very, very interesting and needed work, right, that many people run away from around incubation and building talent early and collaborating with academic institutions.
CC Hub's become the institution of choice for our ecosystem, and it stands as a representation of excellence in that particular ecosystem. And you see how it's even transpired to where there's a footprint in Rwanda, and now CC Hub is an owner of iHub. Of course, I do that as an angel, so let me talk a bit about the angels and the VCs and the early stage investors that have arisen from that.
I'll give you one person, honestly. The rest of us can just line up after him. Mr. Olumide, he's the best angel investor in the ecosystem.
Olumide is taking lead path to Voltron. Kola is on Fund 3 Ventures platform. Okay, then you talk about someone like Yemi Kerry, who's taken Rising Tide, and they now have over 80 female angel investors. Now you're talking about why this ecosystem is thriving. Or is it someone like Biola Alabi, who's running Atika Ventures, a female fund? Tokumbo Ishmael, she's raised $100 million fund in Alethea. I still remember herself and Omobola da Silva when we started out Land in 2012 and they had their first fund.
My predictions for our ecosystem for the next 5 to 10 years is that we're going to see more as we build out talent, right? Talent becomes the bedrock for any ecosystem. And I try to look at LATAM and in the Indian market, and I see probably maybe 5-10 years behind some of those markets, right? But the kind of funding we've received in 2020, 2021, some of that kind of banking numbers happened in those markets in prior years. And you can see where those markets have got into today. So it makes me very, very optimistic that if the macros around and our politics don't get in the way, right, we are going to see sizable companies being built out of Africa.
It probably needs to mature a bit. I think it's quite fluid at the moment as well, so I think that there'll be more focus on areas such as regulation. I think the tech ecosystem probably needs to invest time and energy into more operators as well, in order to actually build long-term robust businesses. As I mentioned, it's great having a dynamic CEO and entrepreneur, but you need teams and you need professional experienced teams around them to actually build and scale a company as well. So it's great to have lots of companies of say 20 or 30 people, but in order to build like big enterprise software companies on the continent, you need hundreds of people as well. So I think that that's where the continent will go as in terms of the tech space. I think probably we'll see some consolidation within the market as well, and that might come through mergers and acquisitions.
You know, when I think about the future, I think like similar to how you have when you hear like internet native or digitally native users, you're gonna have people that are just crypto native. You know, people will never open the bank account because or traditional bank account because they're using sort of a crypto enabled financial service.
Proud of what the young people, the founders, they've done. Like super proud, because when you look at Nigeria is a place that Nigeria can humble anybody. Nigeria can humble even humility itself. That's how difficult it can be. And despite all these challenges, insecurity, runaway inflation, lack of opportunities, people have built global companies, unicorns.
Exactly. This guy is really hitting the nail on the head. Despite the odds, and this is a narrative I've always pushed in this entrepreneurship series. Despite the odds that Nigeria has, infrastructure, this security, that issue, inflation, cost of living and all that, people are still making it. Oh my dear, people are still making it big time. They are cashing out. So I don't know which side you guys are, but I want to actively be among those who are actually cashing out. All right, with the knowledge, impact on the younger generation, and giving of very, very unique services in the skill acquisition and labor market, sector.
Like, I will give it up to every single founder that have done this.
I mean, I think one of the proudest moments I've seen for me in the venture investing is seeing a couple of Covenant graduates come into my office when I did the call for entry for at Leadpath. I really liked them. They were building out something called Push CV. I was pre-screening candidates first before placing them in roles. There was no one doing that at the time. I really liked the team first, and I decided to back them. And I saw them iterate and work on different problems. I finally landed on Piggyverse, which today is one of the most valued startups in our market, creating impact, right? Almost every young person today has a Piggyverse account. It's created, you see touching stories of how they've helped some people save to get married, how they've helped some people save to buy a car, how they've helped businesses. And when you see the impact of that, it's so profound. And then sometimes when I see some of those stories, it takes me back to, wow, so if I had not taken a shot at this by backing some of these guys early, what would have happened? The probably still might have been built, who knows? But seeing the impact of one decision and the way it has gotten to makes me very, very proud.
I think the proudest thing definitely is the rebalance to founder control, right? I'm a founder myself, first and foremost, I'm an operator. I think if you go back 10 years ago, you could raise $100,000 and someone's taking 20-30% of your company, right? And that was just the risk, the competition for deals. That was just the reality because no one was really putting $100,000 into companies, and that was just a simple reality. I think now, people are getting together 2 or 3 founders with a pitch deck of their idea, and they're raising $250,000, $300,000, and giving away a significantly small amount of their company, right? And I'm talking about raising like a $3, $4, $5 million, sort of post-safe cap. So I think just more sort of control being in the hands of the founder is definitely one of my proudest moments.
When you go to the Cape Town ecosystem, they can tell you, it was the whites, they were here in Stellenbosch, they built this thing, or when you go to Nairobi, they'll tell you, it was the aid organizations, they came here, they resourced all the stuff, and because it was nice for safaris, that's why they're here. Here it's all us. The businesses were built by us, the talent is our own, the people are our own. This is not something a white man or woman can take credit for.
When I look at how far we've come, what makes me proud is one, the people. I like that's being a constant. Human capital is really important, and in tech, there's nothing more important than that. Funding, like the amount of money that's poured into Africa and specifically Nigeria, it makes me incredibly proud because it's validating of the work that so many players have put in. And the last thing is the diversity, and it's not just male-female diversity, it's everything, right? Somehow, Nigerian tech has evolved to a place where everyone has a space.
I think I'm most proud about the fact that I know that we are building and have built world-class products that can stand shoulder to shoulder with any product built in the West or anywhere else in the world. That we have world-class talent here in Nigeria, and that we are going.
I hope you guys are getting that, because this is in contrary or opposition to what certain medias are pushing, that Nigeria is having a brain drain. Where are they getting that kind of news or that kind of impression that there is brain drain in Nigeria? Even with the exit of some doctors, some I would say, because the exit of these doctors, they are not exactly up to like even 10% of Nigerian doctors. There's still a lot of doctors practicing in Nigeria despite the difficulty. So I don't know what gives them that wrong impression that Nigeria is having a brain drain of nurses and medical staff and all that. There's still a whole lot of the nurses and doctors and so much more. So the fact is that it's only someone who really has an insight into the future that will really know that Nigeria still has a whole lot of reserves that could take them for ages and centuries to come. Are you getting it? So someone who wants to really make it, you don't need to look at the obstacles. There might be obstacles in making it in Nigeria or starting up in Nigeria, but the prospects are far much outshine and outweigh the odds. That is what you need to know.
To be a force to be reckoned with one day across the world.
I think no one will deny that Nigeria is hard. Living here, being here, it's hard. It's really, really hard. But every day, me and countless other people wake up and we build, and we're hopefully positively.
Another point that this woman is also making, this young lady is making, which is very, very important. Yes, indeed, the country is hard. It has its own challenges, so as it's equal share of challenges like any part of the world. Because even in Canada and in the US that you're going to, they also have their set of challenges. Nowhere is a paradise on earth. Alright, so you just have to realize and make up your mind to this bottom line and determine to make it wherever you are located, more preferably in your homeland.
Impacting numerous lives, and just waking up and going despite all the various things that Nigeria throws at you and the various things that happen just because you're building in Nigeria. I'm proud of that.
I feel a very strong sense of pride at how far this ecosystem has come, because we've gone from barely existing when I moved here in 2009 to being extremely relevant, and the world cannot look away. And there are many, many people here that have become strong and credible voices about this market because of their experience, because of their understanding.
Inspiring would be the word I would use to describe the growth of the ecosystem.
I'd say, the ecosystem's growth has largely been amazing.
The two technical words, oscillator, really magnifying.
The two that I'm thinking of, one is legacy and the other one is narrative change.
I think the one word for me would be freedom. For me, I think it would be flexibility.
I'd say like expansion, maybe, even though that's like a weird word.
I would say that's giving me access. It's been insane. I would say hopeful.
Unbelievable.
Dynamic.
One word, right? Access. Phenomenal. So the word is transformative.
I'd say the sense of fulfillment, energizing,
amazing.
I would say it has been exponential.
Okay, maybe I would use the word inspiring. Disruptive.
For me, I would say growth.
Impressive.
Wild.
Opportunity. Freedom for me. I'd say progressive.
It's been inspirational for me.
One word is sporadic.
For me, it's been tremendous to see.
I would say it's day one because we're just getting started.
So that's just about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the review and the reaction. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, leave your like and help others to discover this video, and your relevant comments. And till next time, cheers and all the best.